My parents said my sister ran away. I found her living 20 minutes away. Original fictional Reddit-style story for narration. My older sister disappeared when I was 9 years old. My parents told everyone she had run away. For 17 years, I believed she had chosen to abandon us. 3 months ago, our father died. While cleaning out his house, I found a storage key, 15 unopened birthday cards addressed to me, and recent photographs of my sister taken from across the street. She wasn't dead. She wasn't on the other side of the country. She was living 20 minutes away under a different name. My name is Grace. I'm 32. My sister's name was Emily, although that isn't the name she uses now. Emily was 8 years older than me. Some of my earliest memories are of her helping me build blanket forts in our living room, reading stories after I was supposed to be asleep and sitting on the bathroom floor while I practiced cutting my own hair. She was more patient with me than our parents were. Our father, Richard, believed children should be quiet, obedient, and grateful. He rarely shouted. He didn't need to. His silence could make an entire room feel dangerous. My mother, Anne, tried to keep the peace. That was the phrase she always used. Keeping the peace meant changing the subject when Dad became angry. It meant apologizing for things she hadn't done. It meant teaching us how to recognize his footsteps and determine what kind of evening we were about to have. Emily was the only person who openly challenged him. When Dad criticized my clothes, Emily told him to stop. When he searched her bedroom, she demanded privacy. When he insulted Mom at dinner, Emily sometimes stood up and left the table. I admired her because she seemed fearless. Only years later did I understand that Emily wasn't fearless. She had simply reached a point where fear no longer made her obedient. The night she disappeared began like any other argument. I woke shortly after midnight to the sound of something falling upstairs. Then I heard Dad's voice. I couldn't understand every word, but I heard Emily say, "You don't own me." A door slammed. A few minutes later, Emily entered my bedroom. She was wearing jeans and a dark sweatshirt. Her backpack was hanging from one shoulder. She sat beside me and brushed the hair away from my face. I asked where she was going. She said, "Just remember that none of this is your fault." Then she hugged me. It was longer than a normal hug. I remember her holding the back of my head against her shoulder. Before leaving, she placed a small silver bird necklace in my hand. She told me to keep it safe. The next morning, she was gone. Her bed had been stripped, several drawers were empty, and her backpack was missing. Dad said Emily had stolen $600 from his desk and run away after he confronted her about her behavior. Mom stood beside him with her arms wrapped around herself. She didn't say anything. The police came that afternoon. They asked about Emily's friends, boyfriend, and favorite places. Dad gave them a handwritten note he claimed to have found on her pillow. It said she was tired of our family and wanted to be left alone. Because Emily was 17 and had taken clothing with her, the police treated her disappearance as a runaway case. Posters appeared around town, but Dad removed the one from the window of his business after less than a week. He said displaying it was humiliating. 6 months later, we received a letter. It contained only 3 sentences. "I'm safe. I need a different life. Please stop looking for me." Dad read it aloud at the kitchen table. He said the letter proved Emily had abandoned us willingly. I asked if I could keep it. Dad refused. He folded it, placed it inside his desk, and locked the drawer. After that, Emily's name was almost forbidden in our house. Dad called her selfish and unstable. He said she had always resented the attention I received as the younger child. Mom never agreed with him, but she never defended Emily either. Sometimes I caught her standing in Emily's old bedroom. If I asked what she was doing, she would say she was dusting. Dad converted the room into an office less than a year later. As I grew older, my memories of Emily became mixed with anger. Every birthday I wondered whether she remembered me. When I graduated from high school, I watched the audience for a face that resembled hers. She wasn't there. When I got engaged, I searched her name online. There were hundreds of women with the same name and none I recognized. I told myself I didn't care, but I kept the silver bird necklace inside a small wooden box and carried it every time I moved. My mother died 4 years ago after a short illness. During her final weeks, I asked if she knew where Emily was. Mom stared at me for so long that I thought she hadn't understood. Then she said, "Some people can only stay safe if they remain lost." I asked what that meant. She closed her eyes and said she was tired. We never discussed it again. My father died 3 months ago. Our relationship had become distant after Mom's death, but I was still his only legal heir. He left me the house, his savings, and the responsibility of sorting through nearly 40 years of accumulated possessions. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Every room contained objects I recognized but no longer wanted. I donated most of the furniture and packed the personal documents into boxes. The discovery happened in the attic. I was moving an old suitcase when I heard something metallic slide inside the lining. The suitcase appeared empty, but the bottom was unusually thick. I cut through the fabric and found a brass key taped beneath a piece of cardboard. A plastic tag was attached to it. It contained the name of a storage facility and the number 214. I assumed Dad had rented the unit for business records. When I called the facility, the manager confirmed that the unit had been paid through the end of the year. The rental agreement wasn't in Dad's name. It was in my mother's. That made no sense. Mom had never mentioned a storage unit. I brought her death certificate, Dad's documents, and proof that I was the executor of both estates. After several days of paperwork, the manager allowed me to open it. Unit 214 was small and almost empty. Inside were a metal filing cabinet, 2 cardboard boxes, and a wooden chair. The first box contained my mother's old clothing. The second contained 15 envelopes. Every envelope had my name on it. They were birthday cards, one for every year between my 17th and 31st birthdays. None had been opened. The return address was a post office box in a neighboring town. The handwriting belonged to Emily. I recognized it immediately. Even after 17 years, I remembered the way she made the letter G with a strange loop at the bottom. My hands shook as I opened the first card. It was for my 17th birthday. Inside, Emily had written, "Happy birthday, Bertie. I know you probably hate me. I hope one day you'll learn that leaving you was the hardest part." Bertie was the nickname she used when we were children. No one else had called me that. The second card said she thought about me every day. The third congratulated me on graduating. The fourth said she had seen a photograph of me at college and was proud. Each card contained pieces of a life I had never known existed. Emily mentioned getting married. She wrote about the birth of her first daughter and said she had given the baby the middle name Grace. She described buying a house and planting roses because our mother loved them. In several cards, she said she was waiting for the day it would be safe to contact me directly. The most recent card had been mailed 11 months before Dad died. It said, "I'm closer than you think. When he's gone, the decision will finally be yours." I sat on the storage unit floor and read every card twice. Then I opened the filing cabinet. The top drawer contained photographs. There were pictures of a woman leaving a grocery store, driving a blue car, and walking 2 young girls to school. The photographs had been taken from a distance. Some were grainy. Others appeared to have been shot through a vehicle window. The woman was older than the sister I remembered, but I knew it was Emily. She had the same narrow eyes and the same habit of pressing her lips together when concentrating. Each photograph had a date and location written on the back. The newest was less than 2 years old. These weren't family photographs. Someone had been watching her. At the bottom of the drawer, I found a folded map. A house on the other side of town had been circled in red. Beside the address, Dad had written, "Laura Bennett, husband, Thomas, 2 daughters." Laura Bennett was Emily. The final item was a letter from my mother. It was addressed to me. "Grace, if you have found this, then Richard and I are both gone. I need you to know that Emily did not abandon you. I helped her leave. I believed I could get both of you out. I failed. Your father found her years later and used these photographs to frighten us. I moved everything here so he could no longer control her with it. Please let Emily decide whether she wants to be found. And please understand that everything I did was meant to keep you alive, even when it did not look like love." I don't remember driving home. For 2 days, I barely slept. I kept returning to the same questions. Why had Mom helped Emily disappear but left me behind? Why had she hidden the birthday cards? Why had Dad been photographing Emily? And how could my sister have lived 20 minutes away without ever contacting me directly? I searched for Laura Bennett online. I found a small design business registered at the address from Dad's map. Its website included a photograph of the owner. It was Emily. She was standing in a bright studio beside shelves filled with handmade lamps. Her hair was shorter, and faint lines surrounded her eyes. She was smiling. I found myself angry at the smile. While I had spent 17 years imagining her alone, she had built a career, married and raised 2 children. I drove to the address the following Saturday. For almost an hour, I sat inside my car across the street. The house was ordinary, gray siding, white shutters, and bicycles beside the garage. Roses grew along the front fence. Eventually, a woman came outside carrying a basket of laundry. She looked older than the girl from my memories, but when she tilted her head, I saw my sister. I crossed the street before I could change my mind. Emily noticed me at the gate. The basket slipped from her hands. Neither of us spoke. Then she looked at the necklace around my neck. I had put on the silver bird that morning without consciously deciding to do it. Emily covered her mouth. She whispered, "Birdie?" I asked if her name was Emily. She began crying. I expected anger when we finally spoke. Instead, the first thing Emily said was, "You look so much like Mom." She brought me inside. Her husband Thomas took their daughters to his brother's house after Emily told him who I was. The girls were 13 and 9. The younger one was the same age I had been when Emily disappeared. Once we were alone, I placed the birthday cards on the kitchen table. Emily stared at them. She asked where I had found them. I told her about the storage unit and Mom's letter. Emily said she had mailed each card to a post office box our mother secretly controlled. Mom promised to give them to me when it became safe. Apparently, that day never came. I asked Emily to explain everything. She began with our father. Dad had always been controlling, but his behavior toward Emily became worse when she reached high school. He monitored her telephone calls, followed her after school, and read her diary. He accused her of lying whenever she wanted to see friends. When Emily was 16, she received a scholarship for a summer art program. Dad refused to let her attend. Emily told him she would go when she turned 18 and that he couldn't control her forever. That was when he became physically violent. She didn't describe every incident, and I didn't ask her to. She told me enough. Mom knew. For months, she secretly planned Emily's escape with our Aunt Diane, Mom's cousin who lived several hours away. The night Emily entered my bedroom with the backpack, Diane was waiting at a gas station outside town. The $600 hadn't been stolen. Mom gave it to her. Emily lived with Diane until she turned 18. She finished school under Mom's maiden name and later legally changed her first and last names. The plan had always been for Mom to take me and leave Dad 6 weeks later. It never happened. Dad discovered that Mom had withdrawn money from a private account. He threatened to report Diane for kidnapping and told Mom he would make sure she never saw either daughter again. Dad had friends in law enforcement and the local courts. Mom believed him. She told Emily to remain hidden. I asked why no one told me. Emily said I had been 9 years old. Dad questioned me constantly about Mom's telephone calls and movements. If I had known where Emily was, he would have forced the information out of me. At first, keeping me uninformed was supposed to be temporary. Temporary became 17 years. I asked about the letter, saying she was safe and wanted us to stop looking. Emily frowned. She said she had never written it. Dad had created the letter to convince the police she had left willingly. Mom copied the message in handwriting close enough to Emily's because Dad stood beside her and dictated every word. The one piece of evidence I had carried throughout my childhood was another lie. I asked why Emily had eventually moved so close. She said Mom contacted her 9 years after she disappeared. By then, Emily was married and had a daughter. Mom began visiting secretly. They met in restaurants outside town and sometimes spent weekends together while Dad believed Mom was visiting friends. When Mom became ill, Emily moved closer so she could help. She attended several medical appointments wearing a hospital mask and using her legal name, Laura. She had even been inside my parents' house while I was at work. That revelation hurt almost more than anything else. Mom and Emily had rebuilt a relationship while I remained excluded. I told Emily that. She didn't defend herself. She said she had been terrified that contacting me would lead Dad to her husband and children. Then she told me Dad had found her anyway. He tracked Mom's car after noticing unexplained mileage. He followed her to a restaurant where she was meeting Emily. After that, he began photographing Emily's house, workplace, and daughters. He never approached them. Instead, he showed the photographs to Mom. Dad threatened to expose everything if either woman told me the truth. He claimed he would have Diane investigated, destroy Emily's business, and tell her daughters that their mother had abandoned her original family. The photographs in the storage unit were the ones Dad used to prove he could reach them whenever he wanted. Mom stole the file from his office shortly before she died and hid it in the storage unit. I asked why Emily hadn't contacted me after Mom's death. She looked at the table. Because he was still alive, she said. Dad attended Mom's funeral and never left my side. Emily had been there too. She stood at the back of the cemetery, wearing a black coat, and watched from behind a group of people I didn't recognize. I remembered seeing her. For one brief moment, our eyes met. I had assumed she was one of Mom's former co-workers. Emily said she almost walked toward me. Then Dad turned in her direction, and she left. For the first time since entering the house, I became truly angry. I told Emily that Dad was gone now, but she still hadn't contacted me. She said she had written the final card after learning he was ill. She planned to wait several months after his death and then give me a choice. She was afraid of appearing at my door and destroying the story I had built around our family. I told her that story had already been destroyed. We spoke for nearly 6 hours. Before I left, Emily asked whether I wanted to meet her daughters. I said I didn't know. Her face changed, and I realized she thought I was rejecting them, so I told her the truth. I had spent 17 years believing she didn't want me. I couldn't transform that pain into a normal sibling relationship in one afternoon. Emily nodded. She said she had spent 17 years imagining the person I might become. We were both grieving versions of each other who had never existed. We agreed to exchange telephone numbers. For the first month, we only sent messages. Emily answered questions about our childhood. I sent her photographs from my graduation and wedding. She sent pictures of her daughters as babies. Some days, talking to her felt natural. Other days, I became angry without warning. I resented every birthday card she had sent instead of calling me. Then I remembered that Dad had photographs of her children. I blamed Mom for hiding the cards. Then I remembered that she had spent most of her life afraid. Understanding their choices did not make those choices hurt less. Update. It has been 7 months since I found the storage unit. Emily and I now meet every Sunday morning. We chose Sundays because neither of us had important memories attached to them. We wanted something that could belong entirely to us. I have met Thomas and both of my nieces. The younger girl asked why she had never seen me before. Emily looked at me and waited. I told her that the adults in our family had made mistakes and her mother and I had needed time to find each other again. It wasn't the complete truth, but unlike our father's lies, it left space for more truth later. Emily and I visited Mom's grave together last month. Emily brought white roses. I brought the 15 birthday cards. We sat on the grass and read them aloud in order. In the card for my 18th birthday, Emily had written, "If you ever believe I forgot you, remember the scar on my left hand." When we were children, I knocked a glass from the kitchen counter. Emily caught it before it hit me and cut her palm. She told Dad she had dropped it so he wouldn't punish me. The scar is still there. After reading the final card, Emily placed her hand over Mom's name on the headstone. She said she loved Mom. Then she said she was furious with her. I understood. I feel both things too. The police reviewed the contents of the storage unit. I don't know whether anything will come from it now that Dad is dead. Diane has provided a statement about helping Emily leave, and the original runaway report has been corrected. That matters to Emily. For 17 years, an official document described her as a troubled teenager who stole money and abandoned her family. Now there's at least a record saying that wasn't true. I sold our father's house. I donated some of the money to an organization that helps families escape controlling and violent homes. The rest remains in an account while Emily and I decide what to do with it. She doesn't want Dad's money. I'm not sure I do either. People have asked whether finding Emily gave me closure. It didn't. Closure suggests that something has ended neatly. Nothing about this is neat. I found my sister, but I also lost the childhood I thought I understood. Emily regained a relationship with me, but had to reveal parts of her life she had spent years trying to bury. We cannot recover the birthdays, graduations, or ordinary afternoons our father stole from us. We can only stop giving him more time. Last Sunday, Emily's younger daughter asked us to help build a blanket fort in the living room. Emily looked at me and laughed. For a second, she was 17 again, and I was 9. We spent an hour arranging chairs and sheets while the girls argued about where the entrance should be. When the fort was finished, Emily crawled inside and handed me the silver bird necklace. The chain had broken earlier that afternoon, and she had repaired it without telling me. She fastened it around my neck and said, "I told you to keep it safe." I answered, "I did." My sister had been living only 20 minutes away, but the real distance between us was 17 years of fear, silence, and carefully maintained lies. We are still crossing that distance. This time, we're doing it together. Optional narrator outro. Could you forgive Emily and their mother for keeping Grace in the dark? Or did protecting one daughter come at too great a cost to the other? Share your verdict in the comments and subscribe to Thread Echo for more dark family secrets and unforgettable internet stories.